Alright, here we go. Welcome everyone. Let me just tweet this out here first of all. You can come say hi. This is Happy December, everybody. Hopefully you're having a good time. December live show going on right now. Okay, so nobody's watching anyways, so we are good. Welcome those of you who do choose to click on that link and that are notified and are actually watching live. The time currently is 10:54 a.m. on Saturday, December 16th, 2017, the year of our Lord. This has been a really good December here so far. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I have been up to, such as going to PodCon here last weekend. I also want to discuss the new Star Wars movie a little bit more in depth because I think there's a lot of interesting things to discuss about that. I think I have something in my teeth, so pardon me while I'm disgusting for just a second. I had a macaroon before we started recording, and there's just coconut here in the back of my mouth. Hello, first person who's decided to be watching here on the YouTube. So like I was saying, I want to talk about PodCon. I want to talk about the new Star Wars movie. And I think I would like to talk a little bit about the Project for Awesome that is going on currently. This is probably a really bad time to do a live stream while right in the middle of doing the P4A, the Project for Awesome live stream that the Vlogbrothers do each and every year. I think this is the 11th year that they've decided to do it. They raise a whole bunch of money for charity, which is really encouraging and great to see. By all means, those of you who are watching, if you would like to leave comments or suggestions or questions, or if you want some advice on anything, leave that in the chat so that, which I think is over here, so the chat over here, you can leave those comments in, and we can do something with that. Let me start off then here. We're talking about PodCon, the podcasting festival that I was at in Seattle here this past weekend. If you saw my video that I posted on Thursday, you'll know a little bit of the trouble that I had while crossing the border. But if you don't know, funny, hilarious thing happened where I live in Calgary, so it's about 5 to 6 hours to the border, depending on which route you decide to take. I decided to take this way so you go through the mountains first, you're in British Columbia, and then you go kind of straight down and into Spokane, essentially, on the U.S. side. I was in this little town called Cranbrook, which is about 45 minutes to the U.S. border. So I'm in Cranbrook. I decided to stop because it's been about 5 hours of travel. And I decide I'm going to have some tea, I'm going to fuel up my car before I jump across into the U.S. And while I'm fueling up my car, I like to go over the things I'm going to be doing in that day. So I'm like, I'm probably going to stop in Spokane to get some food. And when I get to the border, I'm going to make sure I hand them over my passport and just going through what's gonna happen. I like to rehearse a little bit before I have to do any type of anxiety-ridden interactions with people. So, like I said, I'm 45 minutes away from the border. I've been driving for 5 hours. I'm thinking I'm going to hand over my passport, and that is the moment where I come to the really awful realization that I do not have my passport. And I'm livid, like my heart just drops, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did this. This is such a Kyle thing to do, but then also it's just like, what do I do? I'm going to have to drive 5 hours back to Calgary, get my passport, drive the 5 hours back to the border again so that I can cross it and get to Seattle. I was like, that's really not something that I'm really excited to have happen in my life. So I jump onto the internet. I have my little phone, so I go and tappy tappy tap on my phone, and I'm like, okay, can I use this thing called a Nexus card to cross the border? And a Nexus card is sort of like a passport or a second passport. I paid 50 Canadian dollars, so it's about equal to like $5 American. And they've taken my fingerprints, they've done eye scanning on me, they've done some extra security, extra background checks. So essentially that I can skip the line. If I'm in the airport, I can just go right around. I don't have to go through all the security lines necessarily. I can go into like the faster lines. And like I know you can use your Nexus card to cross through any border crossing, but I think I need my passport at the same time. So again, I'm tappy tapping on my phone, Google searching some stuff, and it says that I can do it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try this out. Get to the border. I'm like, all right, dude, I'm pretty sure I'm wasting all of your time. Here's my Nexus card. I don't have my passport, so I'm probably going to have to drive back to Calgary. And he was like, yeah, no, you're fine. Go ahead. Were you really going to drive all the way back to Calgary today? I'm like, yep, kind of needed to. So he was very nice. Interestingly enough, I've always had way better interactions with U.S. border guards than Canadian border guards. Coming back into Canada, they always give me a rough time for whatever reason. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. So that's all nice and good. There at PodCon, though, I had a really, really good time. And I don't know if anyone is like into podcasts or like love podcasts. I listen to probably way too many. I'm pretty sure I'm subscribed to like 45 different ones here at this point. Doesn't mean I listen to every single episode. Sometimes I like to fast forward through some of the boring bits, but I do listen to quite a lot of them and to a lot of different genres and niches and that sort of thing. So I thought, yeah, I want to go to a festival, or not a festival, a convention that's all there to support and exalt in podcasting. Some of my favorite podcasters were there. So being able to see like the McElroy brothers do My Brother and Me live was such a treat. Being able to see Dear Hank and John, the Vlogbers, was really great. Seeing Roman Mars and there's Aaron Mahnke, and there's just some really great people and great creators that were there. And being able to just be in a space where just a lot of people were creators themselves was also super beneficial. There was just a great atmosphere. I've been to every single VidCon as well. So I was at the very, very first VidCon when it was like 1,500 people in the bottom of a hotel. And this very much felt like that. This felt like first year VidCon level, where it's very tiny, it's very intimate, it's very small, but those interactions that you have with the people seem to be a little bit more meaningful because they can take the time. They don't have to feel like they're rushed to get on to the next thing. And so that was very valuable, I thought, as well. I got to stay with my friend Nick. I got to meet up with Tyler, another one of my friends, a bunch of other friends like Josie and names that you probably don't know because they're my friends. But the people that do go to a lot of these different conventions for podcasting, for YouTube, for that sort of thing. And it was just a great feeling and a great time that I got to have, some quality time with these people that I only get to see very rarely in real life, where I'm usually digitally or seeing them via video, which is really great. I think when it comes to podcasting, specifically, I really am excited about what the future holds for it. Right now, I think we are, if we are going to use the example of online video or YouTube in general, even though podcasting has been around longer than YouTube has, it's really only been in, I think, the last few years that it's really kind of gotten off the ground, where you've seen this huge rise in the number of people who are doing podcasts, but also the the creativity that's happening with the podcast format. In that way, to me right now, the year 2017 really feels like what 2009 to 2011 felt like for online video, where it was starting to percolate up. There was starting to get like money was starting to come into the format, and it was right before everything just started to go boom, exponentially grow, and you get like these millionaires and people that can make their living off just doing video work. And I think that feels like that's what's happening right now for podcasting. Not that people aren't already sometimes making a living just doing a podcast, but I think more and more people are figuring this out to make it work. That being said, there's quite a few people, I should say quite a few people, there's a couple of people. I know Griffin McElroy mentioned it, and someone else, I'm going to blank on their name, but they were mentioning that because everyone seems to be having a podcast, absolutely, if you're just using this for fun, if you have no illusions for this to be like a full-time job, you're just wanting to do podcasting because you like doing podcasting, do whatever you want, do whatever you need. If you're looking to stand out or trying to make this be something that you can launch a career from, we're at a point, we're at this juncture where you can't just be like two white guys talking about technology anymore. There's just too much of that right now, so you need to be able to stand out. And whatever that means to you, whether that's the format that you're doing, whether that's the topic that you're using, whether it's you just have such a great personality that it exceeds everybody else, you have to be doing something that actually stands out. You have to be unique in what your idea is. Just doing a pop culture podcast, just doing a technology podcast is just not going to cut it anymore. There has to be something else to that. There has to be an and to that, like an A-N-D, like and this is also what's going on. For instance, like I met these people who do this podcast called The Broadswords, which I've listened to the first episode and I'm really excited to listen to the next three. It's a very, very new. But it's a D&D podcast, which is this huge niche that's obviously going on right now. But it's only women that are playing it. So it's all women group, which the 3 or 4 other D&D podcasts I listen to, even though there's women characters, there's no actual women players that are playing inside those D&D podcasts. So I just think it's a unique way, a unique thing that they can market themselves as. It's a D&D podcast, but it's only women that are playing. Cool. That's making you stand out. There's another one I can think of that's been around for a while, but Pistol Shrimps Radio, for instance, right? It's such a unique concept because it's just 2 guys who go to their girlfriend's rec league basketball game, and they do commentary in the stands. So they literally sit down and are doing play-by-play, and they're 2 like improv comedians, so they'll talk about basketball for a while. They don't really know much about basketball, but they'll play-by-play for like 30 seconds, and then they just go and riff on each other for like 5 minutes, and then come back to the game like, oh, by the way, this is happening, we're up by this much. And they do it in real time, so it's such a cool, funny concept. Peter's in the chat, so he says, hey, Kyle, and I'm saying, hey back, Peter. Thanks for coming out and joining us here today. By the way, if you do have a question, or you want advice, or you just want to say how pretty I am, you can do that over in the live chat. Actually, it's this way, I think. Live chat over on this side. So yeah, using podcasting as a unique form of expression, you have to do something that's a little bit different. You can't just be doing the same old thing, which is why, of course, I get super inspired, and now I have like 5 podcast ideas I have, which doesn't mean I have to do them all at the same time, but it's like, oh, I want to do this and this and this and this to make that happen. So look forward to a lot of stuff I'm going to be doing. Oh, William in the chat says D20 Academy is 3 guys and 2 non-gender specific folks, which is great too. I am a fan of D20 Academy, but I am probably a little bit biased on that opinion as well. Really great editing in the last episode, by the way. Maybe you'll get whatever the equivalent of an Emmy Award is for podcasting. A Pemmy Award. That wasn't funny. I had a lot of time to think and a lot of time to listen to new content because it's like a 13 to 14-hour drive from Seattle all the way back to Calgary. I actually stopped in Missoula on my way back because I can't do this 13-hour drive again. It was too much. I was so wiped out doing that drive all in one shot. So got to see a little bit of the country there. So like I said, PodCon, great first-year event. I really hope they do it again. I'm not quite sure how the tickets all worked out because I don't think it was a sellout, but because there was a lot of tickets you could do remotely, like this is the first convention I know of where all of the content was being recorded and then given to people. So if I paid the remote ticket, I forget how much it was, like $50, I would just get all of the sessions and all of the breakouts recorded, and I could listen to it remotely. So I don't know how that all factored into it specifically. That's an aside. I really hope they do it again. Hank Green, who is like the mastermind of most of the conventions I go to, he made this really great video a few months ago about NerdCon, which is something I also went to that was in Minneapolis. And that was a harder one because it was all to do with storytelling, and storytelling is not a very specific thing, right? Like podcast is like podcasts. Video is like, this is video stuff I'm going to hear. Comic Expo, right? That's comics that I'm going to, or at least geeky things. Whereas NerdCon, when you say it's about storytelling, and that encompasses like books and podcasts and graphic novels and etc. There's a whole lot that you can put into as far as storytelling. It was a harder sell, and it wasn't really successful. But I love that convention. There were so many great panels. There were so many great people that were there. I just really loved being a part of it, but I don't think they're going to do another one, at least not for the near future, anytime in the near future. Peter says he loves Missoula. First time I ever was there, and I loved it too. I thought it was a really charming little town. It was really cold when I woke up in the morning, though there. But yeah, charming. Not at all what I was anticipating. In my mind, I thought it was actually a lot smaller than what it is. It's still a pretty small town, but I was thinking, I don't know, village, and what I got was like town, that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I quite liked it. But if you have a chance to go to PodCon and you're interested in podcasts, definitely recommend doing it if you have the funds and the way to do it. Talking about nerd things, and I'm going to preface this right now and say no spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything at all, but I really do want to talk about the new Star Wars movie, because the reaction online has been pretty divisive, and kind of shockingly so for me. And I have seen the movie, but I just want to talk about it in generalities. And again, I don't really want to get into specifics because I don't want to be that guy who like spoils things for people or anything like that. That being said, I do want to say, like, there's this two main responses that I have seen to it, and this could be just my bubble and the people that I follow online, but it really comes into either really liked it / loved it, or hated it with a burning passion. Like, think that the movie is hot garbage, like just awful bad movie. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of in the middle people for it. It's either loved it, thought it was great, or hated it, think it's awful. And I think I'm going to echo something that Jeff Kanata said. Jeff Kanata is this other podcaster that I listen to. He's on a few podcasts I listen to, a video game podcast and a film review podcast. But he tweeted out and says, like, the first joke that happens, which is very early in the movie, it's like 2 minutes in, if you don't like that joke, you're not going to like the rest of the movie. And if the joke works for you, you're probably going to like the rest of the movie. Peter says in the chat here, I want to see Star Wars. People like it / love it or hate it. I have seen this online as well. Let me put it to you this way. I think I really need to see it a second time to really fully understand what my feelings are. Because while I was watching it, I was pulled into two very different reactions to it. Number one, it didn't feel like a Star Wars movie. And I think that is the reason why a lot of people have that like hate mentality towards it. But at the same time, I think that might be a good thing. One of my main criticisms, at least of The Force Awakens, as much as I liked that movie, was that this is very much like a nostalgia trip. They're really paying fan service a lot in this movie. I'd like to see them try and push out of their comfort zone and do something new and unique with it. And Rian Johnson, this director, absolutely did. Like, he's using Star Wars characters, but doing things that are different and feel off to like the normal Star Wars universe. Um, William in the chat says, I think the reactions are because of the IP. Nobody wants to be lukewarm with Star Wars, which is true. You have to have that like strong stance so you get those clicks or you get that interaction with your audience online. Again, trying to be as non-specific as possible. I've been really thinking about this, and I think the two big things are, number one, they're trying something a little bit different with the Star Wars property. And that's as much as I'm going to get into it as that. And secondly, this is a movie which, when you go back to the original Star Wars movie, right, a lot of people talk about how it was written and how it's essentially just the hero's journey. If you read up a lot on how to write screenplays or even books for that matter, one of the ways you can do that is the traditional hero's journey, where it's like he goes off on a quest, he's faced with hardships, he meets a couple of companions, they figure things out, there's a climax, there's falling action. Like, this is the standard, movie script writing. And in this movie, again, I don't want to go into specifics, but most of the characters end up getting frustrated because there isn't that release, there isn't that climax, there isn't that moment where, like, hey, I got what I wanted. I would say for both the villain, like the antagonists and the protagonists, both of them are frustrated because no one really gets what they want. And I think that's what the unique part of this movie is. I would say that there's maybe one or two characters that you could kind of argue do get what they set out to do at the beginning of the movie, but by and large, nobody really gets what they want. And because of that, you as a viewer are sometimes left frustrated because there isn't that release. There isn't that moment of being like, oh yeah, great. I get my catharsis. I get this climax of action. That just doesn't happen in this movie. They're much more focused on other things. I also think that this is somewhat of a failing of our current culture, where when a movie comes out and we know that there's a sequel, or that we hope that there's a sequel, all these fan theories start popping up. And you can work yourself, and I've been part of this 100% with like Marvel films and James Bond and all the other stuff that I like geek out over, where it's like, oh, they did this in this movie, and my theory is that this is what's going to happen in the sequel. And I think it would be great if this happened in the sequel because that could lead into this movie over here, and then this stuff could happen. And you kind of write this narrative in your mind. And when that doesn't happen, where this like your perceived like best movie or the best plot that could happen doesn't happen because the filmmakers had an entirely different idea from the very beginning, you can start to like push that away and be like, I don't like this because this isn't my perfect version of this story. This isn't the thing that I really wanted to happen. And I think there's a little bit of that. And I tend to try and stay away from that type of discussions and Reddit forums sort of thing. For like, this is what I want to have happen. This is the storyline that I think would be the best to tell this story in, because you could get so like dug into the ground, your heels dug into the ground by like, this is what this story has to be, and it only makes sense if this is the resolution to this storyline, and this is what I think this is leading to. And I mean, the classic thing is like who Rey's parents are and what this is setting up. And when some of those things are revealed in this movie, and they go against what the perceived narrative is supposed to be, I think people get really frustrated by it. I also think it's okay to not like this movie. I'm not here trying to say, like, you have to like this movie or else you're wrong. Movies are movies. Anyone can have different reactions to things. I definitely like movies that a lot of people hate. I also hate some movies that a lot of people seem to like. So that's perfectly fine. From my perspective, I think a lot of the criticism seemingly comes from people thinking like, this is not what a Star Wars movie is supposed to be, and also this is not the best way to have told this story. When I think there's legitimate criticism in this movie to talk about some of the plotting specifically. There's some scenes I think that drag out a little bit too long. I think could have been helped out. And there's one scene in particular I think could have been completely removed and made an even stronger film. But that's kind of nitpicks here and there. Anyways, I want to see the movie again before I come right down and say this is how I think I feel about this movie 100%. But that's what good art does too, is that you want to interact with it. You want to like think about it and chew on it and get into the weeds with it a little bit more. We're going to wrap this up here pretty soon. We've been going for 25 minutes here at this point. All I wanted to shout out was that if you are not familiar with the Project for Awesome, this is something that happens every single year. The Green Brothers do this every single year, and their focus is to help out a bunch of charities around the world. So you can go to like youtube.com/vlogbrothers, and you'll see the live stream that's going on right now. You can also go to the Project for Awesome website. You can just type that into Google. It'll go to the website. And take a look on there. You can vote for what charities you think should receive a good hefty portion of the funds. I definitely think it's something that you should check out. I really love the fact that so many people involved in online video and in podcasting and in this new media landscape are really focused on charity work and helping out less fortunate people. I just think that's great to see. So any type of help that you can give to others, I think it's definitely something that should be applauded, which is all great and good. Okay, I think that's going to be it for me, unless anyone has any like cool questions or life advice or anything like that. Otherwise, I am probably going to log off here in like 45 seconds from when I'm saying this right now. Let me take a drink of water. Two things. Number one, I really advise watching the video I post on Monday. I just think it's a really fun video. It's my friend Nick Taniguchi, and my other friend Tyler May. For the entire weekend of PodCon, we're pitching podcast ideas, like really ridiculous podcast ideas to each other. So we kind of just made a video trying to pitch each other ridiculous ones. And I just think it turned out really well. So I'm really proud of it. I think you should watch the video I upload on Monday. Patreon, my Patreon page is always available for those of you who can or want to help support me. Patreon.com/TheKyleMarshall. I'm going to be doing a very quick, like 10-minute one for just patrons over on my Patreon page, a live stream there. And then we can go hang out a little bit more. William in the chat, though, does have a question, which is, have you heard of the Bechdel Cast podcast? Which I have not. I'm assuming this is to do with the Bechdel test, which is how people treat women characters in movies. Which sounds fascinating. I'm assuming they do watch movies and see if they pass the Bechdel test, which is a really fascinating thought experiment, which is that to pass the Bechdel test, and William, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is you have to have more than just one woman character. Two, those women characters have to talk to each other during the movie. And thirdly, that conversation can't be anything to do with the main protagonist. If you can hit all three of those, you pass. If you can't, then you fail the test. And at least, as far as I understand it, it's getting slightly better, but like over 70%, almost 80% of movies do not pass that simple test of having two women characters who have a conversation with each other that has nothing to do with the man who is the protagonist of the film. But that sounds really cool. I'm trying to think of. I'll shut up my other friend Tyler's podcast. He does something called Mr. Feels, which I'm a big fan of. It's all to do with mental health and trying to erase the stigma of mental health. There's another one that I was going. Oh, this is a great one too. Those of you who like musicians and stuff like that. Even if you don't like this person's music, I just think it's a fascinating podcast. It's called I Only Listen to the Mountain Goats. And they talk to John Darnielle, who is the guy who is the lead singer of the Mountain Goats. But it's all about a single album that he created, and they go song by song each episode. And he talks about like how it was written, why he wrote it the way he did, the instrumentation he decided to use. It's just a really fascinating talk. I think John Darnielle is a really interesting person to listen to talk for long periods of time. So definitely recommend that. And I'm just going to quickly browse through here and see if there's any other ones I want to quickly highlight. Oh, I mean, this one is getting more and more promoted anyways. It's kind of a bigger one now, but I just got on the You Must Remember This train. Sorry, it's not train. You Must Remember This is what the podcast is called. And it's all about old Hollywood from like the early 1900s to about the early 2000s. And they just pick a story and then they do like a kind of a mini series on. So they just finished up, for instance, this like I forget what it was, 7 or 8 part series on Boris Karloff and guy who played Dracula, Bela Lugosi. So Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and how their two careers kind of coincided with each other, but one was very successful in his later career and one was very not successful in their later career, and how that all went together. They also did like a 12-part series on Charles Manson here a couple years ago, which I highly recommend. I listened to that on my drive down to Seattle, and it is pretty interesting, like how all these different people in Hollywood were affected by Charles Manson in very interesting ways, and how people's different careers kind of forked off or were like ruined or like somewhat made because of what Charles Manson did. Really good. So yeah, Bechdel Cast podcast. That sounds fun. I think I'm going to check it out, see how it goes. So thank you everyone for watching. Like I said, this has been fun. And until next month, we'll do a January live stream. I'll see you then, and have a Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, Happy Holidays otherwise, whatever you celebrate. I want you to have a happy, great time. Spend it with friends and family. Think of me. Yes. I was trying to think of a joke. It didn't come. I apologize to everyone for wasting their time. Have a great day, everyone.